Hello and welcome to our Community Chats podcast. Glad that you've joined us today for a conversation with Brendon Pooran. Brendon and I cover a few topics of interest, and every time I talk with Brendon, I'm impressed with his expertise and insight into these rather complicated and sensitive areas, but also his willingness to share his expertise and perspective. We're lucky to have him working on these areas. We cover three areas today. One is an update on MAID. Our last podcast we did with Brendon dove pretty deep into MAID and some of the challenges. Wanted to just check with the change in government whether there's anything that new that is coming. So that was good to get touch base on that. The second is the Canada Disability Benefit. It is off and running, and Brendon provides some tips around what he's seeing as people are registering for this benefit, and also some of the challenges and workarounds that he's experienced. Really helpful if you're in the midst of sorting that out. And finally, supported decision making is something that I've been really impressed with some of the progress other jurisdictions, both across Canada and around the world, are making, but also fairly disappointed around how far Ontario lags behind this rather important piece of legislation and framework that empowers people to have more control over their lives every day. Great conversation that I hope you enjoy. I now bring you Brendon Pooran. Brendon, welcome. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well, Brett.
Lots to talk about today, so we're going to try and focus in on a few issues over the next half hour or so. Last time we got together, we talked about MAID for quite a bit of time. And I guess the biggest change since we met last time that I'm aware of anyway, or I guess most of us are, has been a change in Prime Minister. An election, we went through all that, and we have a new cabinet and a new set of government priorities. I don't see disability well represented in this cabinet. I believe it's part of one of the Secretary of State's portfolio, MP from Toronto, Leslie Church. So that's good that she's got that portfolio, but certainly not the profile that it's had in the past. Are you seeing anything different with MAID, or has there been any changes to policy that we should be aware of?
Yeah, not much. I mean, I'd say that I assume that the policymakers are sort of continuing to work on the provisions related to mental health, MAID and mental health, and with the deadline sort of coming up in 2027, maybe working on provisions related to advanced directives as well, and possibly mature minors. But I haven't heard much in terms of how those developments are coming along. Just through my own reading and research, I guess what I've seen, at least here in Ontario, is that the rate by which people are accessing MAID has sort of leveled off. So there were these significant spikes year after year. I would say right up to about 2023. We saw some gradual declines in those rates, but now the most recent statistics for 2024 show that the number of people accessing MAID has leveled off, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. So I would interpret that as it was fairly new. People were learning about it. There needs to be some level of infrastructure built into, doctors making approvals, the processes for appeal, and that type of thing. So that took a while to ramp up. People, I think, also just thinking about myself, you'd have to get your head around that this is a thing, and that you would want to do that depending on a circumstance. I'm sure many family members have these conversations when they get a diagnosis or before, and you sort of see this almost alarming increase from when it started. And the leveling off, I guess, is just that people sort of settling in with what this is and how it can work for them if they need it.
That's right. I think there were some early adopters, when MAID first came around, and it's sort of built into the infrastructure now. I mean, I think we still need to see what happens with the whole track 2 piece. Again,
Remind us track one versus track two.
yeah, so the difference between track one and track two, with if you're accessing MAID through track one, that means in addition to all of the other requirements, your death is naturally is reasonably foreseeable. My apologies. Whereas under track two, it's not. So there's some additional safeguards built into play there. My recollection, I think in 2024, was that the statistics showed that about 4% of MAID deaths in Ontario were accessed through track two. Right. So there's a lot, obviously, of I think division within the community with respect to track two. There's we spoke about this last time around. Like there are concerns for people within the developmental and intellectual disability community that track two.
And just to sort of make it a little concrete, so track one would be you get a diagnosis of something, whether it's cancer or some kind of illness that will inevitably lead to the end of your life, and people will make that decision that they don't want to go through that pain or whatever might be involved with that, and that's the track one group. The second piece might be you're living with chronic illness or some kind of diagnosis that will not necessarily inevitably lead to your death, other than we're all inevitably going to die. But this would be a decision based on just that, whether it's a disability or that chronic condition, and that's being built in as an option for people with. It sounds like more sort of safeguards built in, but certainly not enough from our perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So under track two, like your medical condition is serious and incurable, but death is not imminent, right? Okay. Whereas under track one, death is imminent. But yeah, I mean the main safeguard under track two being this 90-day assessment period and confirmation that all other options have been considered. But again, not sure that that's enough to address the concerns of many folks who are sort of saying, this could lead to situations where, instead of people accessing disability-related supports, instead of lawmakers and policymakers focusing on how to support people better in their communities, people are just accessing MAID instead as a way out.
Okay. Yeah, there's been some pretty tragic cases, and the circumstances, right, where people are saying, I would continue to living, but say, and I'm pulling this from memory, so it may not be fully accurate, but the apartment I'm living in isn't accessible, doesn't have proper heating or whatever or accessibility features, so I'm stuck, and my life is so poor from my perspective that I don't want to continue living. Seems like a just extremely objectionable reason to choose to end your life, when moving could be another alternative that might work for a person.
Absolutely. Or accessing proper home care supports and adequate home care supports, right? Like just I say this, relatively simple fixes that could be put into place to address people's needs.
Yeah, because as a general principle with track one or track two, you would think that, choosing MAID should be your last option. It's, it's clearly your final option. Like you want to make sure that everything else that can be done has been done. And there's still too much variability or concern that track two does not sort of meet that threshold, or there's not enough being done to wrap around a person that would take that off the table for them, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And depending on your condition, you may not have the wherewithal, right, to even without the proper supports in place to access what you need, right? There are numerous stories that, you've cited a few that we've heard of, where people are just simply trying to get an accessible place to live. They're trying to get adequate home care supports. They are simply looking for a roof over their head, right? But they've endured this consistent suffering over the years. They have nowhere else to turn, and now the law permits them
Right.
to simply end their life,
Yeah.
right? Without the adequate safeguards that are in place. So it some see it as very problematic.
It's shocking that that's the level of discord we're at around, addressing a person's problems as it relates to chronic illness or chronic disability.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think the statistics show, and I don't want to say only 4%, because 4% of I think approximately 3,000 Ontarians who accessed MAID in 2024 is still a significant number, but
It is. It is.
yeah, it
It
is.
is.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not that number increases
Yeah.
over the next few years.
And anybody that has to make this decision, whether you're in track one or track two, it's the most difficult decision anybody in their extended family or in their network will have to make. So completely understandable that there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of emotions on both sides. What's the next? So, in terms of the new government,
Mhm.
we haven't seen any change. Things are sort of status quo from the last government. What's on the horizon? What should we be looking for next around up and coming or deadlines that are coming our way?
Yeah, so it's 2027 that we're looking out at, and that's gonna we're gonna sort of get some direction from government with respect to people with mental health disabilities accessing
Okay.
MAID, and what that is going to look like in terms of legislative and policy framework, and what kind of safeguards are going to sort of be implemented there to ensure that.
So sorry. So that's government policymakers coming up with their proposals, or is this a court process?
Oh, this is government policymakers. So it already
So
went through
they've
the
just
courts.
said we'll
Already went through
get
the
back to you in
courts.
2027.
Yeah, it was supposed to roll out in 2024.
Right.
Government needed more time, and so that deadline was kicked to 2027.
Okay. Now, our national organization, Inclusion Canada, has taken a real lead on this and a real position. What would you recommend to people that in our community or that might be listening to this, if they've got thoughts on how they might influence that policy? Are there channels that are available to people?
Yeah, so I believe Inclusion Canada is a coalition partner,
Yeah.
part of a group of organizations that actually launched a constitutional sort of action in relation to track two last year. So that's sitting somewhere in the courts. I would encourage people to reach out to Inclusion Canada to seek
Okay.
more information on that litigation, but they are definitely leading the charge within our sector in terms of raising concerns related to track two.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about this again. So that's a good update. Thank you. Canada Disability Benefit.
Hmm.
So you and I have watched this for years now, and we've been at events. I think where the minister of the day talked about how impactful this was going to be, and it would lift people across the country out of poverty. And I've had conversations with ministers provincially around how they would treat that benefit going back to COVID, right, and before COVID. So this has been around for a while. It and poverty is one of the most challenging or one of the most significant issues facing people with disability. If you're on in Ontario, ODSP, your income is around $1,400 a month, which is about 50% of the rate of poverty. So you just by definition of being on ODSP, you're living in poverty. People can earn some income, part-time job, and those exemptions have raised, but poverty's endemic and it's a problem. And the CDB for certainly early on was held out as, okay, this is going to help lift all
Yeah.
kinds of people out of poverty right across the country. We've since learned what it is. We've seen the details. Did that promise get fulfilled?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anybody out there in the disability community that wouldn't agree that it was a disappointing outcome. At the end of the day, I think many people had, as you said, Brad, these grand expectations that that this benefit was going to lift people with disabilities out of poverty. I mean, these were the statements that were being made by the minister at the time and by the federal government. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, we saw a monetary cap of up to $200 per month, right? So a top up of up to $2,400 per year, which obviously helps, but was not what the community was expecting. So it was definitely a disappointment. I guess on the positive side, at least, here in Ontario and in most of the provinces across the country, the federal benefit has been exempt, has been treated as an exempt source of income from an ODSP standpoint. So ODSP is not clawing back that benefit, which is great. So, people would be entitled to up to $1,400 generally, a single recipient ODSP. And on top of that, now there's the $200 CDB.
Right.
And I guess, some would say at least the legislative framework is in place that would allow the government to increase the benefit when the time is right. So, whether or not that happens, we'll have to wait and see. But overall, there's no doubt that it was a significant disappointment.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think that could even be characterized as an understatement. People were upset, feel that pledges had been made and commitments were made, and $200, it is what it is. But it's certainly in the Ontario context, in Toronto, which I'm most familiar with, it's lifting nobody out of poverty. And again, I'm with you. Credit where credit's due, right? So conversations I was having early on with government was they were sort of looking at about a 50% clawback. So if the federal government gave you 200, they'd take $100 off your ODSP allocation, right?
Yeah.
Although I don't think anybody was thinking $200. They were thinking much more. So the fact that they're not making that move has changed. I also wonder, though, there's been some decent developments in Ontario as it relates to income security and ODSP, right? So for years, ODSP rates were frozen.
Yep.
You'd get the odd government that would, as part of a budget, say we're increasing rates by 1% or 2% or whatever. And then the Ford government came out a couple of years ago, maybe it's 3 years ago now, where they said they were tying the ODSP rate to the rate of inflation, which caught me surprisingly and in a good way off guard. I think that was very bold. So, and again, not to say that ODSP is anywhere near enough, but at least it's the ceiling has sort of leveled off because you're going to keep track with inflation over time. So that was good progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there were three key enhancements. One was an initial 5% bump, right? That the government,
that was an election promise
right
that
away.
they increased the base up by 5%. Yeah.
And then to your point, the second was an annual increase based on cost of living. So now every July 1st, I believe, every July 1st, we're seeing an increase in ODSP payments. And then the third was the one that you alluded to relating to employment income.
Employment supports,
Yes. So prior to the change, people could earn up to $200 per month in net income prior to a 50% clawback applying. That threshold was raised to $1,000 in net earnings per month. And now there's a 75% clawback
for anything after over and above the 1,000. Yeah. So if you start doing the math on those, and for people that it works, you can get enough to not live in poverty if you're able to have employment for up to that 1,000, or at least get above the poverty line. So that's progress. But the CDB is one of the smaller contributions to that at this point.
Yeah, I mean the CDB is, I would say, relatively insignificant for a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
I think the main concern that we are hearing now with respect to the CDB is a lot of people are having difficulty accessing it.
So it's a good point. And just to close off that piece around the monetary amount, in the same way that ODSP rates have changed over time, the CDB is not set in legislation as being that amount. I'm assuming that's set in regulation, and government can change that and increase. They could tie it to inflation. They could increase it when they're able to. So that is something that our community can look at advocating for. So it could increase over time.
Exactly. And I would strongly encourage our
Encourage
community
that.
to do so. Yes.
Okay. So now the other concern with this was, how do you get it? How do you apply for it? Because again, federal legislation, they're working across, what is it, 12 or 13 different jurisdictions around how they quantify or qualify people for their version of ODSP or whatever it is in different provinces. Do you need a diagnosis from a doctor? How recent does it have to be? Who can make decisions about the money? All those kinds of things. And I know that many of us had given lots of feedback to government around keep it as simple as possible, tie it to something else so that people don't have to go through extra hoops, and don't exclude people because of needless bureaucracy or hoops have to go through. How close did we get on that expectation?
Well, I guess on the positive side, I mean, this was rolled out relatively quickly, right? So I think there was this urgency from the government at the time to get this out the door, to get it up and going, because there was just political uncertainty at that time. So it got out the door, but in doing so, in rushing through this process, the accessibility framework is flawed and the application framework is flawed. Okay. First of all, you've got the main eligibility criteria is that people have to be eligible for the disability tax credit, which was something that I think a lot of people in the disability community had pushed, had sort of requested that the government not pursue, right? Because there are just so many issues for a lot of people out there when it comes to applying for the DTC. But the DTC was a framework that the government already had in place. So it said, we're just going to use this. We're just going to use this. It was easy.
It was an easy add-on given your
they didn't have to, a lot of us were trying to suggest that perhaps there could be some sort of streamlined application process through the provinces and through the territories. So maybe the DTC would be one, but also if you qualified for social assistance at the provincial or territorial level, like ODSP, you would also qualify. Yeah. But I guess logistically and from, just federal, provincial, territorial standpoint, that may have been too difficult to administer. Yeah. But I think the real issue is, so you've got the DTC, that's the main criteria. Yep. A lot of people are having trouble accessing the DTC. I mean, the government has made some improvements to the application process on the DTC side over the last few years. However, applying for the CDB is actually a two-step process, right? So not only do you have to have the DTC in place and apply for that, but then you've got to go through Service Canada to actually access the benefit. Okay. I don't know, I can't think of off the top of my head any other government program that people with disabilities apply for, whereby they've got to knock on two doors to access one benefit.
So what are you doing at Service Canada? I mean, I go to Service Canada to get my passport renewed.
You're applying for the benefit. You're applying for the benefit. You're applying for the benefit
at the local Service Canada retail outlet.
Yeah. So it's kind of So it's kind of like, the registered disability savings plan, let's say, right? Like using that as an analogy, the main eligibility criteria is a disability tax credit as well. It's a DTC through the Canada Revenue Agency, through CRA. And then I guess it is a two-step process, because then you got to go to a financial institution. You got to go to a bank or an investment advisor to open that. Right. It's kind of similar in the CDB world, right? You have to have the DTC in place, and then you have to go to Service Canada to actually apply for that benefit. Okay. And people are facing, there are numerous barriers that people face when it comes to applying for the DTC, but let's say you're able to get that. People are now facing barriers at the Service Canada door. What kind of things? Mainly related to legal capacity. So, and this, I should preface this by saying this isn't necessarily an issue, depending on where you live. But for people here in Ontario, based on how our laws work around consent, capacity, and legal decision making, those laws are creating a barrier for some people to access the CDB through Service Canada. Meaning, if a person is considered to be incapable of managing their property, only somebody who is legally authorized to act on their behalf can interact with Service Canada.
Right.
Which means filling out a legal representation form through Service Canada, or it means having a power of attorney in place, power of attorney document in place. Some people don't meet the legal test or the legal thresholds to execute those documents, and therefore they're being told that guardianship is needed in order to access the CDB.
Okay.
Right. So it's the same issue that people have faced over the years. Some people have faced over the years when trying to access the Registered Disability Savings Plan, the RDSP.
So how is Service Canada making that determination as to whether somebody's capable or not? Is it just do they have a process in place, or is it, we do with banks a lot with people, and a lot of times it's just they eyeball a person and go, I don't think that person's capable, or I'm not comfortable with making that decision, and they make them go through a process.
So Service Canada is not really interacting with people unless they're applying in person. The majority of folks are applying online or by mail. And so what's happening is, my understanding at least, because we're getting a lot of calls here at the office, is that person may apply online or somebody may help that person apply online. And then Service Canada is calling in some cases to verify information or to collect additional information. And then the supporter, that's usually the parent or a family member, is sort of explaining the situation. And based on that explanation, right, Service Canada is saying, okay, well, I need some sort of legal authorization before I can engage with you.
Okay.
So there is a form. There is a form that Service Canada does have, and I've got it here. It's called the consent to communicate information to an authorized person form. So that may help some folks. Someone, you can fill out the form, sign it, give it to Service Canada, and that would authorize somebody else to speak on your behalf. Not necessarily apply for the benefit for you, but share information on your behalf. There's the legal representative process, and then, like I said, there's the whole power of attorney and guardianship process here in Ontario.
So again, just listening to you talk about it, it's hard to keep track of all the pieces there. What would you recommend for people? So Service Canada website, I guess we're just Googling up or using ChatGPT to ask to get to the Service Canada website and go through the process. If people get stuck, where can they go to get more information or learn from others about what they've gone through?
Yes, I'd say the first thing is most people will receive a letter in the mail that they are eligible for this benefit. There'll be like a 7-digit code.
Okay.
You go to it's a very, I would say, at least from my perspective, fairly user-friendly website to apply. You punch in the code, you may not have a problem.
Right.
You'll encounter a problem if a follow-up is required with Service Canada, right? And a conversation is required. So if that's the case, they could look at this consent to communicate information form, right? They can authorize someone to share information with Service Canada on their behalf. They could try to complete the legal representative form. It's another Service Canada form that may work. They could speak to a lawyer to see if they can execute a power of attorney document. But right now, there isn't, I wouldn't say, like, there is unfortunately no easy fix for this. Right.
So we're kind of figuring it out as we go, and I guess people will figure it out as we go, right? And you mentioned that people can reach out to your firm, not to advertise or anything like that, but you're available to do that. Other representatives are, I'm sure, as well. I don't know. Certainly at Community Living, we haven't developed an expertise in this area to be able to help or advise people, but that may be something that comes similar around the support that's available if people want to set up an RDSP, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what I'd say is we do have a blog where we have links to the Service Canada website, to all of these various forms that people can access. So I would say have a look at our blog. Try pursuing some of the options that we share on that blog, and hopefully one of those would work out for you.
Okay, we'll put a link to the blog
Yeah.
in our notes for this. You mentioned legal capacity
Yes.
and the ability to represent yourself, and that. And this has been a sticking point, well, not just a sticking point. It's been a problem in Ontario for a long time. And it really stood out to me. I was at a couple of weeks ago the Inclusion International Conference.
Hmm.
It's held every 4 years at different part around the world. There's 79 countries that come together, and you sort of learn from each other around what's going on. I sat in on a legal decision or legal capacity discussion presentation from two South American countries, Brazil and Colombia. And I was stunned by how much further ahead they are uh, as jurisdictions than we are in this space. Again, grassroots movement, as we've done, raising it up as people should have rights to make their own decisions, and they've been successful with that. So a lot of the stuff that we've dreamed about over the years, they've actually implemented or are on track to implement. So it was really discouraging leaving there thinking, because I always sort of think of Canada as kind of progressive in a lot of the things that we do. And I hear that from other countries. But in this area, I was feeling like, wow, we've got a lot of work to do. So maybe just, I know you've been a big proponent of this. Right now, the default assumption is that people can make their own decisions. Is that fair?
Presumption of capacity. Yes, people are presumed to be capable of making their own decisions.
And then as people get older, or you start to you want to protect yourself, you can set up a power of attorney, right? And there's two power of attorneys. One is power of attorney for property. So if somebody needs to make a decision or sign something on your behalf or make a decision because you can't around property, you can do that. And
Yes.
then there's one for personal care, for
Correct.
same around health if you're not
Yes.
able to make those decisions.
Correct.
And I could sign those, and then they're revocable. So if I change my mind, if I make you my power of attorney for property and then say I don't want Brendon anymore, I can change that and go to somebody else.
As long as you're capable of doing so.
As long as
Yeah.
you're capable.
Yeah.
The rub comes in when somebody else says, I don't think that this person is capable and I want to make decisions on their behalf, or somebody questions a person's capability to make their own decisions. Then you get into the idea of substitute decision maker. So when you get to that point, talk what happens in Canada right now? What's the process?
So in Canada, this area of the law falls within provincial and territorial jurisdiction, right? So every province and every territory has its own law governing consent capacity. We are very, very, very behind here in Ontario, but other jurisdictions within Canada are leading the way, right? Like a lot of the supported decision-making legislation in U.S. states, in countries down in South America, are actually based on provincial legislation up here in Canada.
Who are the leaders in Canada?
Well, one of the pioneers was BC. The Representation Agreement Act has been around in BC for decades, and the Representation Agreement Act, I mean, there are some people who have issues with the legislation, but it provides a much more progressive framework for people to appoint a trusted friend or family member to support them in the decision-making process than anything we have here in Ontario. In Ontario, the law is very clear. It's either you're capable or you're not capable. And if you're considered to be incapable, then somebody steps in your shoes and makes a decision for you, as opposed to out in jurisdictions like BC, where the law respects the fact that you may require support in making your own decisions.
So what would that support look like?
The support would look like, so that the legislation is based on the concept of a trusted friend or family member being able to interpret your will and preference. Right. Just by knowing you, by having a relationship with you. The interpretation of will and preference is a much lower sort of legal threshold than we would apply here in Ontario when it comes to determining whether or not somebody can, let's say, execute a power of attorney for property.
Right.
So the issue here, and you articulated well, the issue here is that we have these instruments, They are more or less substitute decision-making instruments, but the issue is that a lot of people don't meet that legal test, right? So they can't even, they don't even have the option of executing a power of attorney. Saying that I want my sibling to help me. I understand that
Right.
I need help. I may not be able to manage money to the level that I need to. And so I want my sibling to help, but because they don't have, or they're not able to articulate or to communicate a sound understanding and appreciation of their assets and their liabilities and their income and their expenses, they can't execute the power of attorney
And
document.
and this could be because of the nature of the disability. Person might be nonverbal, may not use speech to communicate, may not be able to write.
Right.
So in those cases, then the default becomes, well, they can't decide for themselves, and somebody has to be appointed by. But who would make that decision as to who's
So yeah, so
appointed?
they can't make a decision for themselves. They
Yeah.
can't choose who they want to support them in making a decision. They can't choose who they want to make a decision on their behalf, right? And so therefore they're subjected essentially to a litigation process, right? To the courts, because you then need a third party to apply to the court, or on the property side, you could actually apply through the public guardian trustee's office to become their legal guardian.
Okay.
Either legal guardian of property, two types of guardianship, one of property, one of the person, same as powers of attorney. But
Right.
once legal guardianship's in place, that means that the person is no longer able to make any decisions for themselves. Right? So all of their decision making
Is
ability
vested in somebody else.
is vested in somebody else, and it's relatively permanent. I mean, we have
Yeah.
been able to get guardianships reversed, but they're very few and far between.
Right.
Right? Once guardianship's there, it's there, and the person virtually has no say in who is appointed their guardian. And there's very little oversight of the guardians as well, right? So
Okay, which I assume has in some cases led to different types of abuse, or people being taken advantage of financially, or their will not being recognized, whatever that might be.
yeah, unfortunately, we've worked on some pretty ugly cases, and I'm not going to say it's rampant, but what I will say is that there are minimal safeguards in place to ensure that that especially people's finances aren't being mismanaged.
Right.
Or on the personal care side, what we've seen a lot of are guardians of the person restricting access, right, to other people, or making choices with respect to what that person eats, what that person wears, what activities that person participates in.
Right.
So it's a very, very invasive it's a very invasive option.
So how do we fix this?
Well, I mean, the Law Commission of Ontario underwent a fairly significant law reform project between, I want to say it was between sort of 2014 and 2018, in and around then. And there were a ton of recommendations that came out of that project. It was focused on legal capacity and decision making and guardianship. There was a little bit in there related to supported decision making, not a whole lot, but based on to the best of my knowledge, nothing from that
It it it
report
you
has
know
been implemented.
yeah. I I'm not the most informed person in the world, obviously, about many things, but I haven't heard a thing about this in Ontario as being an issue for a long time. You hear people talk about it, and we all go, "Oh man, this doesn't feel right or
Yeah.
work well." Um, but I haven't heard anything sort of being done about it to address it. It's just sort of an understanding, man, this could be better, but no movement.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on it, working on this legal capacity piece very narrowly right now with respect to the RDSP,
Yeah.
because there is a barrier to accessing the RDSP for a number of people who are considered incapable of signing a contract. The federal government has sort of put temporary measures in place to address that, but
Oh, really? Okay.
those measures expire next year,
Okay.
and so
But that's a start.
Well,
So
it's
there's
a
a
start. I mean,
recognition.
they did it a while back. The
Okay.
problem is that those temporary measures don't address the barrier for everybody. So what they do is they allow a parent, spouse, common law partner, or sibling to be an RDSP plan holder. A lot of people don't have family members, right?
Right.
They don't have siblings, they don't have parents, they don't have partners to. So they're still facing the barrier. But that was rolled out initially in 2012. Siblings were added last year or a couple of years ago,
Okay.
but these are temporary provisions that expire next year.
Okay.
And so the onus is on the provinces and on the territories to fix their legislative framework, to fix their laws so that this isn't an issue. I mean, Ontario, the issues that people are facing with the RDSP, the issues that people are facing with the Canada Disability Benefit, with the Canada Dental Plan, all stem from Ontario having outdated legislation.
Okay. Well, that is something that we should focus on as well. There's a lot of advocacy priorities, but this seems like an important and somewhat urgent one as well.
Agreed.
Final question. Did you get out golfing much this summer?
Well, I played a lot of tournaments in
Okay.
the month of September. So I don't know if many people who watch me would consider that to be playing golf, but I gave my best shot, and yeah, I mean, it was awesome weather this summer. So
It was great. It was
fun on
great.
the
Are you feeling
greens.
good? Are you feeling good about your swing and the game and all that, or you just prefer a tournament because usually you're just playing the best ball? Or
That's tournaments are my go-to.
I don't.
Yeah,
It is a helpful way to play.
That's right. That's right. It really is.
Brendon, thanks. Always get a lot of great information from you. Thanks for the work you're doing with your firm and for the connection you've got with both Community Living Toronto and our community. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Brad. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks. Thank you for listening, watching, and sharing. We release a new episode of Community Chats on the 15th and 30th of each month, so don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date.